All right. So this is meant to be rapid fire, but we want to get to know you all. And so if it's all right, we're just going to, we have a couple of questions that we have, but I'll put you all on notice right away that as we get going, there are some mics that are out in the crowd, and we're going to take questions. There's one here I see, and one here. So I'm pointing to the middle of the room, to my right, your left, and my left over there. And you're welcome to ask questions. In about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll get to audience engagement. And you can also obviously be using the Twitter handle if you want to both raise questions and offer editorial comment if you're so inclined for ASU Empower. So Di, if you don't mind, let's start at your end of the row. We'll just come right down, Debbie, Rudy, and so forth, Lester, down the line. And just by way of introduction, we've used dictionary definitions of community. We've used Latin derivatives, etymology of community. I've tried to use some examples that I think are part of the way IT folks think about it. But introduce yourself and the way you, as a result of like where you've come from, how you think and how you approach community.
Thank you so much for having me here. As you might tell from my accent, I am an Australian. And so for me, when I think about a community, I use the word mateship, which really defines the Australian population. We are a country that we work together, and I think there was actually a great piece in the New York Times just this weekend about how Australia really defied COVID when you compare it to the United States. And so it's about lifting up the people around you. It's about finding the most vulnerable people in your community and making sure that they have every chance to succeed. So it is about the whole and making everybody is along for the ride with you.
Thanks so much, Debbie.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for having me here today. I am definitely not the IT wizard, but I am so thrilled to be here because it does align very much to the work we do at the YWCA. When I think about community, it's really a way to not hold the whole, of course to hold the whole, but it's helping and making space for each individual to show up in their full authenticity. All the identities we each have, all of the intersections that we have, and welcoming the learning about other identities and other perspectives so that we can create a community that really does work together and support each other and learn from each other. So that's where I'll stop for now.
Debbie, just one last, do you want to sort of share anything at all about your background that brings you to that way that your organization thinks about community?
Certainly. The YWCA, its mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And we do that, and what I'm listening carefully for today, and you're all right in that space, it's dismantling systems that no longer support those folks, us folks, me folks, in the community as fairly and as equitably as it does other folks. So I hear a couple giggles. So that's what brings us to the work, and certainly technology and access to that is one of the ways that systems keep us out from creating and fulfilling our full potential. So
thanks, Debbie. That's terrific. Rudy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm actually honored to be sitting up here. I think I look at the crowd and I see many people that throughout my journey here at ASU, it's 29 years this January. And so
you can put your hands together for Rudy. That's okay. Show him some love. Show him some love.
So for me, when I think about community and what I've managed to work through here at ASU, I grew up in a Latino family, and one thing that my friends learned, which were non-Latino, was there was always food at my house, and there was always an open door. And so relationships have been an important part of my career here. I've always worked towards building those communities, those relationships, no matter who it was that I worked with. I see several of my team members here, and part of my leadership style and things that I've learned is to embrace that community and give them the opportunities to come to my house whenever they want, feed them when I can, and sort of be open to supporting their growth and development. So it's been quite a journey, and I thank all of you that have been part of it.
Thanks, Drew. That's terrific. Leslie?
Yeah. I'm Neil Lester. I'm a professor of English here at Arizona State University with a specialty in African American literature and culture. So I do everything from Zora Neale Hurston to the race and gender politics of hair. My sense of community has come, in addition to directing Project Humanities, which is about bringing individuals and communities together to talk, listen, act, a little bit of TLC. What I've tried to establish in my responses to community is trying to disrupt this notion that there is the community. Too often, we can practice saying that, but that's not exactly how we think about it. So for me, community is not static. Community is actually quite fluid. You can be parts of multiple communities at one time. If we could stop thinking about the community, even in terms of the university and the community, that's what I've tried to do in terms of my research, in terms of teaching, and also in terms of my service and outreach. So if we could sort of rethink this notion of community, and it's not just about who you're with, but communities can exist all over the planet through IT.
Neil, do you want to just say a word about sort of how you've come to that thinking about, and I'm going to give you my mic because yours is cutting out.
I came to that by seeing places where I was not present. And so even though I may be included, I felt excluded. So that was not community for me. So community is when I felt and knew that I was connected and being heard and being seen. And I don't want to use those in sort of ableist ways, but that's what my sense of community come from, by seeing where I was not, or where I was not invited, or not where I was felt like I was to be welcomed. So it came from this position of being erased or invisible.
Thanks. So I'm just immediately responding to the notion of the term because it signals a few things for me. One in particular, more recent years, something I've become cognizant of, which is there are the communities that we pursue or we see ourselves as part of, and there are communities that people see us as part of, and it's important to own all of that. Not just be selective in regard to the communities that you either see yourself as part of or just the value components of those communities that you want to be part of who you are. And so it's caused for me, for example, I came across from the science side, I did genomics work, so when I go into a science area, I just expect that I'm a scientist too, this is going to go well. No, I'm administration now, and that's the bottom line, and that's how I'm seen, and I need to appreciate that. So before we approach our scientists, we'll read some of their recent work and have that opportunity to resonate on what they're doing and really bring ourselves into their space. But I encourage folks to think about community as something we're entirely responsible for, also in terms of how we're perceived, because that was something that took me a while to arrive at.
Hi, I'm Angela. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm a member of the Slack for Good team. And before I was on Slack for Good, I was a product manager at a domain name registrar. And I kind of got into the for good space by volunteering at a nonprofit in my free time. And that nonprofit focuses on grassroots community organization and building systemic changes through a giving model called the Giving Project. And so I was in a cohort for 6 months with people from all different backgrounds and races and ages and abilities. And we did race-based caucusing in this volunteer project sometimes. And I was in my 30s, and it was the very first time in my life that I had been in a group of all women of color. And it just hit me. It just hit me like, whoa, like this was missing, and I didn't even know it. And so I've been building that piece of community for myself with the Women of Color in Tech group. And for me, that community is just, it feels like home. It feels like a belonging and not having to explain yourself. And people just know, they get it, even though you have different experiences and different backgrounds. It's just coming with a level of understanding. But then I do also want to acknowledge everything that everyone else has said. You know, another part of my community is parents who have been forced to understand too much about Minecraft from YouTube, you know? And so I do think it's very multifaceted, and it can also change as we grow.
That's great. Thanks, Angela, very much. So I'm going to go back the other way, if it's okay, and just another question, given that we're at an all IT professional gathering. And Angela, you were already onto this, but invite you to say more. And if you don't mind, perhaps just weaving a word or two about kind of your day job today, which is, in what way have you found we're going to sort of give you a two-part question. What way have you found technology an enabler of your effort to build community or communities? And in what way, as again, I think Debbie was already intimating, does actually technology actually either serve as a barrier to or actually restricts access to the development of communities that are out there? So if you wouldn't mind, Angela, we'll go back down the line starting with you, and I think that would be really interesting for folks to hear.
Great. So disclaimer, I'm going to be very Slack specific because that's my job. That's why I'm here. So on the Slack for Good team, our mission is to increase the number of historically underrepresented folks in technology. And we're not the tech people. We do that by building relationships with nonprofit partners through our Slack for Nonprofits program. We also do that through our apprenticeship program for formerly incarcerated folks to become engineers called Next Chapter. But for me personally, before I even worked at Slack, I did start the Women of Color in Tech community on Slack, built it out as a Slack community, and it just started with like 10 of us in Denver. I'm from Denver. And we were like, are we the only ones? We can't be the only ones. And so we started this Slack community, and we're over 800 members now. And so that has been a really great way to connect with folks around the world. So just expanding our community, and it started as a networking group, and now we're really working to help everyone level up, right? So we believe like if one person succeeds, we all succeed. And so like, I got this raise, this is how I did it. Anything, everyone can ask questions. We just started a mentorship program. So that's one way that technology I've seen has really enabled us to expand our community and really help each other.
Anything on the other side of the coin that you think is worth us reflecting on? Because I think, again, one of the wonderful things about being at a university is that we can both embrace being in some way idealistic about the way the technology can support it, but we're also aspiring to provide critical skills to folks. So we welcome your insights on how to think critically about technology.
I definitely think that there can be huge gaps that are created by technology. Who has access to it? Who has not only the money to get the laptops that you would need, the internet access, to be able to access all of these different technologies that are building bridges, but who has the capacity? Who has the time, right? You know, if you're not working at a desk job, if you're an essential worker, if you can't take out your phone and be connecting in all these ways, how are we making sure that there's still the space to build these connections and bring everyone in?
Yeah, hugely important and really important insight. And I think many of us here, certainly over the last 2.5 years, have understood that it's definitely a double-edged sword. Again, testament to the effort to build communities, whether it was the moms in Slack channel that but the women who were moms across the ASU community got together, silver lining groups, faculty supporting each other through moments of question and doubt, as well as how the hell we're going to get through this, and obviously hundreds of different students groups using Slack channels and workspaces along the way, but very mindful that not everybody is in that world, and we have to be very mindful of that as well. Sean.
Sure. One thing I know for many of us that are proficient with technology, sometimes we can lose our interest in the more basic stuff, which, depending on who you're interfacing with, can be truly transformative. So there's a reason, Lev's highlighting broadband and local access. It's not because that technology solves for everything, but it starts to level playing fields and just gets people involved in ways that they can have a kind of fundamental enablement. That can actually be really fun to explore. So I just encourage folks to bring this depth of expertise you have to, so for example, I did a webinar with universities in Africa talking about what kind of low-cost approaches they can leverage to get research administration up and running. It's a totally different challenge, a very interesting challenge that it's really a challenge to us as well. We benefit from a lot of resources. How do you do this super efficiently and effectively? What tools do we know of, communication tools and otherwise, that let people start? So it will improve your understanding and your ability at that higher level to really engage at a level that's basic community capacity development. And that you can't broad brush that either. So, it also reminds us, I think we see exercises all the time where there's an effort to broad brush. And those don't really often go anywhere because there's too much important nuance at a community level. So it's a great opportunity to understand a community and provide assistance.
Terrific. And let me just underscore a point. I happened to be invited last week to go to Times Higher Education gathering at MIT last week, and I was on a panel with a colleague, distinguished senior colleague from the chemistry department, who relayed that the epiphany that he and his 2 Nobel laureate chemistry colleagues had during COVID was the use of Zoom. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. What did the epiphany add up to? He said, it had nothing to do with video. It was actually the use of chat. That was the breakthrough. And again, the idea that now in the way they think about doing real-time engagement with their students and student-to-student activity, as well as the opportunity to ask, what did you miss or not understand, essentially in real time, that kind of feedback loop. So again, an example, I think, where simple things like chat obviously didn't show up last year. You know, IRC has been around for about now almost 40 years, but there it was, a couple Nobel laureates thinking that was the big breakthrough. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, what I find interesting about that connection with technology and enabling is the ways in which technology, as you pointed out, can also separate. And here's my personal example. Whenever I go through TSA, I'm stopped, and my hair is patted down every single time. And not just me, but people who have hair like mine. And so what it reminds me of is that we have to do a whole lot of work whenever we make these advances to see what are we also losing. And one of the most life-changing documentaries that I've seen, which I'm sure you have all seen as required watching, is Coded Bias. And the ways in which that is an everyday experience that can bring people together and create social movements, but it can also do these other kinds of things that we have to be aware of simultaneously. That's my whole connection with communities also, is the fact that these things exist at the same time. They're not one or the other. And I'm understanding now how we think of technology in terms of being very forward moving, when in fact technology, as I understand it, in my very, very lay understanding, is really about looking at what's happened in the past to try to predict. But that's when we start moving into those areas where we shortcut our experiences with people because we rely on stereotypes or caricatures or things that happened in the past and look at what's in the present only through that lens of what happened in the past. So for me, the technology has been a challenge to sort of think more critically and deeply about what it is I'm experiencing or not experiencing.
That's terrific. And in that T4 that I referred to, the T4 Academy, one of the areas, domains we're going to be looking at is data. And Mike Sharkey, who's the faculty on that, is going to be taking a look at implicit bias in AI, which is, again, one of the ways in which we have to be very mindful.
Well, it can't be just it's not just looking at IT, unconscious bias in IT. It has to be in healthcare and education. And, we just had a program, Project Humanities, when I say we just did a program on the pressure of high school students to get in elite schools. Well, if you start digging beneath that, then you recognize that education in and of itself is not something that is designed to bring people together, it's to separate you. So that in and of itself is where technology also falls. There has to be a very intentional, deliberate way of saying, let's resist that and also move forward in the name of progress and innovation.
Thanks, Neil. Let me just invite, if you have a question, we're going to go through the second half of our panel here on this question, and then we're going to try to take at least 1 or 2 or 3 questions from you. So again, the one microphone there, another sort of, again, both of them in the middle, and with that, Rudy, we'll go to you.
Thank you. So I'll start with kind of a personal thing as well, in how I think it's enabled the groups that I use. And then I'll crush it with a sad story, because that's how I roll. And so, I was an early adopter of Slack. I believe it was pre-you joining as CIO Lev. And I still do, run a small comms team and desktop or IT team and organizational performance office, if you guys know Clayton Taylor. So I remember in my day job, which is as managing director and chief of staff for the executive vice president and CFO, which is daunting in itself, I get tons of emails. And I remember my comms team sending me one-line emails. Can I go home? Can I do this? Can I do that? And it was just, you know, overwhelming. And so I remember running across this tool called Slack. And I thought to myself, boy, I'm going to share this with my communications team and see what they think. My first thought was, great, another leader trying to tell me how to do my job and doesn't want to be bothered by emails, and you know, maybe they're all thinking, go pack sand. And so I said, you know, let me try this out. And I gave it to them, thinking that they wouldn't do it. And they took an amazing opportunity to, the first week or the first month, I can't remember, was thousands of communications between each other. And without me telling them what to do, they immediately started connecting collaboration tools to it. And they were all working inside of it. And it was an amazing sort of evolution to watch within a month, which made me happy because I figured, one, I alleviated my own email problem, and two, it gave them sort of this empowerment to do something IT related, when most of them really aren't in the IT community. So that's my happy story. On the second side to that, which is your second part of your question, is, you know, technology's been great, and I've been here since the green screen eras. When I see some of you in the crowd, we used to run focus reports. If you don't know what focus is, somebody sitting next to you, I see them smiling in the second table over there, can tell you what that is. And so technology, you know, I've watched the evolution. It's been great. It's also done some harm, as we know. And I think our responsibility, or everybody's responsibility, but particularly those in the technology field, is sort of this responsible technology. And we have to understand, we don't know who's on the other side of that. We don't know who you're dealing with. Back to Dr. Lester's comment about, you know, equality and things that we're doing. That is a responsibility in the IT community that plays a role with everybody, the things that we're doing.
Thanks. Debbie.
Got a couple of examples, again, probably both sides of the coin. The one I'm going to start with is, it's about infrastructure as well. One of my most recent experiences, before I was with the YWCA, I was with the Girl Scouts. Have any of you been to the Parsons Leadership Center in South Mountain?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful facility. I was responsible, soup to nuts, to build it and make it operational. Wi-Fi didn't go that far. As the developer of the project, we had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to dig the cable down the road and bring it to our site. That helped the entire community. I mean, the infrastructure that the Girl Scouts put into that space, no one ever sees, but it was millions of dollars. So that's one part that we still need to deal with, that there are communities that simply don't have that infrastructure. And that's an important thing to look at. That's policy, that's resources, that's more than just having a bunch of hotspots. The other thing I'm going to share is, as part of YWCA, we run some direct services. We do direct services because they need to be done, because communities need service. One of our programs is a meals service, senior meals program, Meals on Wheels. Now, that's because there's food insecurity. That's because they live in a food desert. That's because all of those reasons that keep people from having access to nutritious meals. One of the things we learned during COVID, not only did our requests for meals go up about 25%, but more folks were homebound. We were all sheltered in place. We made an assumption. There was an assumption that these seniors couldn't access technology. We were wrong. We had to actually ask them. And we had to do some things that were more phone-based than computer-based, right? And change the way our interface worked on the platform so they could read it on their phones. But we started providing more virtual programming and connections so that our seniors could stay connected with each other and with our team. So that was, again, we just have to ask, not assume what is the situation. And the last one, again, it's not just access. I'm going to share this one. As a small nonprofit, we're about $2 million. When we went into pandemic, we were not prepared to go virtual. We did not even have a server or a network. We were just pieced together with what I call Band-Aids and spit. We kind of climbed our way into, putting in a network and upgrading our system, but we didn't have the capacity on the team. There were no consultants ready to come and say, hey, YWCA, let me help you figure out how to do this so it lasts longer than just pandemic, right? That you can really grow on it. So that's another opportunity when you're thinking about your volunteer opportunities. Don't overlook the fact that we have, as organizations, we have some basic needs.
Thanks, Deb. Bye.
So I'm going to do a slightly different take in terms of technology and the work that I do. So I'm a public health lawyer by training, and a lot of the work I do is in communities to actually reduce the number of people who die. A lot of that work has been actually on the roads, and I have lived in sub-Saharan Africa to reduce the number of people who literally die in that region. And it's amazing how technology is actually an enabler of safety. So about 92% of all accidents involve somebody who's got drugs or is drunk, or is a human error of one kind. And we think about autonomous vehicles as being really funky, cool technology, and isn't that great? But autonomous vehicles are a great way to reduce the burden of road toll. Approximately 1.5 million people die on the roads each and every year across the world. If we don't do something about that, that number will get to 5 million by 2025. And yet, the flip side of that is when we had one fatality here in 2018, the people in Tempe and Chandler actually took to the streets with baseball bats and started attacking the cars that they saw around the roads. We did, as a community, a terrible job in terms of actually distilling a narrative around why autonomous vehicles are important and why they actually can have a life-changing effect. And to go to the example of the elderly, we know that people, when they lose their license, are actually more likely to end up in aged care facilities. We need to actually be able to have these people age in place. If we can have these individuals, these communities trust autonomous vehicles, it's actually a great way to keep people in their home, keep them healthier, and reduce the economic costs associated with aging in this country.
Thanks, great insights. Okay, we got time for at least 2 questions. We'll go first here and then there.
All right. Well, thank you. One of our themes this week isn't just about community, but about giving back to the community. So I was wondering if, like Neil and Debbie, particularly for Hacks for Humanity, the YMCA, if there's individuals here today interested in participating and engaging with you, do you have information for us?
Okay, so just a second, Debbie and Neil, before you. Let's get the second question, because maybe there's a way to, I don't know what it is, but maybe there's a way to weave it in, so.
Oh, that would be awesome. I'd be very impressed. So my question is actually about communications and storytelling. Those of you who may know me may not be surprised, but it seems to me that all of you are united either through the ASU mission or YWCA or Hacks for Humanity. There's always a mission, and with a mission, there's an education that needs to be happened and a narrative that needs to be crafted, especially when you're starting something new or there's a barrier to climb. What are any strategies or tips you have or stories about stakeholder inclusion and getting people on board to join something new and that they maybe don't know about?
Right, and there definitely is going to be a way to go there. So, Debbie, we're going to let you pick up, again, what can folks do who are interested? Obviously, this is a week in the context of a year where at ASU we're committed to giving back. So tell us a little bit more in addition to helping build infrastructure, which you've already invited people to be involved in. Please, what else?
I think there are other opportunities. How about now? I think there are other opportunities that can relate, and again, I just want to reinforce YW, not YM, but YW is, there are these volunteer opportunities related to our direct services. We also do financial education, primarily for women and people of color who are in some sort of transition, coming out of domestic violence or a financial situation or a healthcare situation or incarceration. So there are technological issues. Again, we had to adapt in how we presented those. So would love some folks to help put us on a on-demand platform to run some of our programs, to help us get more of that in the can and available. On the senior side, also focusing on ways that to do some interactive virtual types of engagement with seniors and their community. That's an opportunity. I don't know what it looks like. That's where some brilliant minds come and do some generative thought development. I love Christine. I worked with Christine at the Girl Scouts as well. So I'm loving all the words, collaboration, co-creation, those things. So that kind of work could happen to build some new senior programming. And lastly, as it relates to our racial justice work, really, again, making sure that we have a technological component to that. Right now, most of our work is people-based, but in order to scale it, we will need to do some technological enhancements as well. So.
Yeah, I think part of it is that we have multiple stories that we tell individually, and what we can't do is tell our story to everybody, so we need more people to help tell the story of their connection to whatever it is they're passionate about and what they're connected to. Our hand here, so our model, did you leave? You're the model here. Could you stand up? I didn't even plant you. Could you sort of circle? Do you mind moving around? There's a hand there.
Bonnie.
Yeah, there's a hand. Bonnie, yes. There's a
Bonnie
hand
block,
there.
everybody.
And
Bonnie
I'm
will
wearing
block.
it here, but we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand. And I love that operative word can, because what that means is it doesn't mean you can't do anything by yourself, although I would argue that there is no success without collaboration. Name one. Anybody who said they are successful because they only had a $100,000 or $100,000 loan needs to rethink that. I did this all by myself. So we acknowledge that first and foremost, is there is no success without collaboration. And what we've done is we've tried to seduce, coerce, invite others in to see what we're doing, so that it's not just a matter of us telling the story, but once you witness it, then you have a story to tell. And that has been incredible, whether it's ASU News telling stories about the programs that we do, or you coming to a sorting or a service Saturday, or coming to our Hacks for Humanity and recognizing that there is nothing on the planet like Hacks for Humanity. Nothing. There's hackathons here, hackathons there, but not a hackathon that centers on principles that we call Humanity 101, empathy, kindness, respect, integrity, forgiveness, and self-reflection. Now, those are not faith-based, but based on our faith in humanity. And so that sense of inviting other people, because they have a story that I can't tell, and I have a story that they can't tell. But together we can tell these stories that can invite people in and create community, at least for that moment that we're together.
Right. I'm going to give the other panelists basically a takeaway opportunity, a message that you want to make sure to share that you haven't gotten to, but it occurred to you, either hearing from your colleagues or perhaps from the two questions that were out there. I will start with you. We'll end up at this side of the table. There we go. Hack for Humanity. There we go. Wonderful. Di.
That's pretty hard to top. Thanks for that, Lab. So what has struck me as I sit in this room and I look at some of the most talented people here on the ASU campus, I think about what you've done in the last 2.5 years, and as a faculty member teaching in this time, thank you all very much. But I look at some of the solutions that got rolled out by this team, and to think about how that has accelerated the potential of some of our students getting access to mental health care that they desperately needed, or being able to access peers across the world when they were so isolated. All I can say is keep on being creative, because what you have done is making a difference and will continue to do so going forward. And we're also grateful for the blood, sweat, energy that you've put in over this period of time.
Thanks, Di. Rudy?
I totally agree. And to Dr. Lester's point, I don't think I would be where I am today had I not met the journey of individuals that many are sitting in this room. And the important work that is done in technology and help advance the institution is important. And don't ever underestimate having a conversation with someone. You could potentially change your life by spending 10 minutes with them. Sometimes it's challenging to have that mentality of patience when somebody can't find where the mouse button is. But it's you got to remember that not everybody is who you are. And that's something that I've learned and cherished throughout my career here.
Thanks, Rudy.
Yeah, I think one way that we can wind up in trouble is if we start to really bring our eyes down to the technology itself as the end, is the thing that we're most excited about. And we lose sight of what it supports, what it enables. You just keeping your gaze at that level, where that's the goal, and these are different ways of getting there, of supporting people getting there. I think people that fixate in that way are more willing to switch up their repertoire. They're more willing to do what it takes to support the outcome than, perhaps fixating on, the notion that they are affiliated with this technology is part of who I am. I think those are very dangerous ways of thinking, because it's really about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to support, and we all have to be sort of sand artists in that sense, right? We have to be willing to wipe away the things that we've created because it's about what we're trying to accomplish.
Angela, last word to you as a take-home message.
This is something that came to me when we were talking about storytelling. So our next chapter program for formerly incarcerated folks, it's a lofty idea to hire formerly incarcerated folks as engineers in Silicon Valley. And it actually started because my boss went to San Quentin, and she was there, and she got proximate to the issues, and she met people, and she heard their stories. And she's like, we got to do something. And so she took 400 people from Slack to San Quentin. And this is a time when Slack was only about 1,200 people. So it was a big impact on our culture and who we are. And we started with 3 apprentices at Slack 3 years ago. And this year, we had over 30 apprentices at 11 partner companies, including Zoom and Dropbox. So this is something that has changed the tech sector and created a powerful impact for this community. And it just started with listening to someone's story. So I think that it's really important.
That's a great, great message. Great way to also end this session. Folks, please join me in thanking this terrific panel.